Sometimes an old interview gets more interesting after the product ships. That is what happened with young Zhilin. Before Kimi K3, his older interview sounded like what you would expect from an ambitious frontier model founder. After K3, it sounds more like an early map of what Moonshot was actually trying to build. Stay with me, because the interesting part here is not just that Kimi shipped a strong new model. It is that an old interview now tells you which bets mattered and which scoreboard Moonshot was using all along. Welcome to B Explains Everything. Kimi K3 was officially introduced on July 16, 2026. Moonshot positioned it as its flagship model at 2.8 trillion parameters, with a 1 million token context window aimed at long horizon coding, knowledge work, and reasoning that matters on its own. But what made me pay attention was something else. A reposted older interview with Yang started circulating again, together with a breakdown article calling out 10 lessons founders should steal. Once you look at the old interview after K3, a lot of what sounded like founder philosophy starts looking like a consistent product theory, not proof that he was right about everything, but proof that the worldview was real. The first thing that looks smarter in hindsight is Yang's obsession with scale. He had this blunt framing: if a problem can be solved by scale, be suspicious of solving it with some clever new algorithm first. That sounds almost crude when you first hear it. Too simplistic, too brute force, too frontier lab. But now look at what Moonshot actually shipped. K3 is not a cute boutique model with a clever story attached to it. It is a giant bet on scale, long context, and the idea that capability compounds when you keep pushing the base model hard enough. So the old interview stops sounding like hand waving. It starts sounding like Moonshot telling you very early where they thought the real leverage lived. The second thing that stands out is how seriously Yang took long context. A lot of people treated long context like a product bullet point. He seemed to treat it more like infrastructure. If you think long context is a feature, you market it. If you think it is infrastructure, you build everything else on top of it. K3 did not arrive as some random pile of benchmark wins. It arrived as a flagship model for long horizon work. So, looking back, the long context obsession was not just technical taste. It was part of Moonshot's theory of product value. This is the part I find most important. Yang kept coming back to the idea that benchmark gaming is meaningless and that the real benchmark is the user. Every founder says something like that eventually, usually because benchmarks stop flattering them. But here it seems more structural than defensive. The same interview points toward user feedback, product use, and interaction with the world as part of what makes the system better. That lines up neatly with the current agentic direction of the market. K3 is being positioned for coding, knowledge work, and long running tasks. That is not just our model scored higher. That is a claim about usefulness in a loop, tools, environment, feedback, correction, a different scoreboard. The interesting reading is that Young was describing a stack of beliefs that K3 now makes easier to see. Scale matters, context matters, and user reality matters more than sterile leaderboard worship. The value is not just in a model thinking harder inside its own skull. The value is in a system that can survive contact with actual work. That should sound familiar if you have spent real time building agent systems. We keep seeing the same divide everywhere: models that look smart in the demo versus systems that can actually do the job. This does not mean founders should copy Moonshot by trying to outspend frontier labs. That would be a stupid lesson. The thing worth stealing is not the budget, it is the way the bets were framed, which problems were superficial, which ones were structural, and which scoreboard they were optimizing for. If you're still building around benchmark prestige alone, you're probably building for the wrong audience. And if you treat tools, feedback loops, and environment contact as optional extras, you're still building half an agent. Some of Young's worldview only makes full sense when you're building at frontier scale. Scale does not rescue smaller domain systems, local deployments, or enterprise tools from latency and budget limits. So do not steal the mythology. Steal the discipline of knowing where your leverage actually is. That is why this old interview matters now. K3 does not prove Young was right about every technical claim, but K3 makes it clear that Moonshot was not randomly stumbling from one model release to the next. There was a worldview there. Now there is a product strong enough that the worldview deserves a second look. Looking back, the interview reads less like founder theater and more like an early blueprint. In AI, that difference matters. The people worth watching are usually not the ones with the loudest predictions. They are the ones whose shipped systems make the old predictions look less crazy.